Hello and welcome to Sound Off with System One. I'm your host, Morgan Bossi, Marketing Manager at System One, and we're here today with our panel of experts to talk with you about resume and LinkedIn optimization. Before we get started, here are a few words about System One. System One is a leading provider of specialized, highly technical, outsourced services and workforce solutions to critical infrastructure, technology, life sciences, and government sectors, putting more than 650 employees and 10,000 contractors to work in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Brazil. As you're tuning in today, please join us in the comments and our marketing team will be monitoring them. Let us know where you're joining from and what industry you work in, and if you have any questions relevant to today's topic, please drop them in there as well, and we can try to answer as many of those today as we can. But first, I'd like to have our panel of experts introduce themselves. They'll also be sharing their hot jobs, which you can find at the bottom of the screen or by scanning the QR code at the top. To view all available jobs, please visit our website at jobs.system1.com. Chandra, we'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Chandra Bray, and I am the Senior Business Development Manager here in the Houston market, where we cover mission critical, data center, energy, manufacturing, construction, amongst other industries. Our hot job is a nuclear supplier quality manager. This is a contract to hire position paying up to $100 per hour. It's contract to hire after 3 months. You will be needing to have 5+ years experience, and an NLQA certification is required, as well as being able to travel up to 40%.
Hi, my name is Catherine Matos. I'm a senior recruiter at Jolie. I specialize in life science and healthcare recruitment. My hot job for today is a medical education program director in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. For the requirements for this role, you would need at least 8 years of experience overseeing the education program within the medical school. Ideally, they would like someone to be in the Pittsburgh area, but they are open to someone who is willing to relocate or at least travel for meetings.
Hi, I'm Tanuka, and I'm the recruiting manager for the System One IT group. We help with Java. We are looking at somebody who has 12+ years of experience in Java, Spring Boot, microservices, and Kafka and Angular. And this position is on site 5 days a week. It's a contract to hire opportunity with one of the financial clients of ours, and the location is either Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Dallas. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. All right, so let's get started with our questions. Again, we're discussing resume and LinkedIn optimization. So whether you're actively looking for a new role or just working on building your personal brand, these insights can help you in your career journey with that. So our first question is, how important is tailoring a resume for every application, and where does that customization make the biggest impact? Kat, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Tailoring a resume is very important. I mean, I think a lot of times people tend to think that you would need to rewrite your resume for every single job you're applying to, and that's not the case. Especially if you're applying to jobs that's, related to your career path or to your background overall. There's certain things that's on the job, like more so in their requirements or must-haves that they're expecting this person to have. And if you have that experience, all you really need to do is just add maybe 1 or 2 bullet points to every job that you've had, the experience in. But again, you don't really need to change your resume completely, but it is important to tailor it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Kat. And it's not about being a different candidate for each job, but something that you really want to pay attention to when creating those bullet points is aligning each one of the skills that you have in that current role with the next role that you want to be in.
Yeah, I agree with both Kat and Chandra. But in IT jobs, because technology is ever changing, so it is essential that you also make a note of the skills or the tech stack that you're working on. If it's not possible for you to put it on your role and responsibility, make sure you put it in the environment. So yes, customization is important, and it's very important that you add those skills that are listed in the job description in your resume.
Great reminders. So that leads perfectly into our next question. If you only had 10 seconds to review a resume, what would immediately grab your attention? Tanuka, we'll start with you.
I think the immediate thing is we usually look at a profile against a job. So how relevant is the resume to the job? Where I look at the job titles, some of the top skills if the person has worked on, and also the educational qualification as well as certifications. Yeah.
Well said, Tanuka. I would say that numbers definitely catch my eye first, but it's not just the numbers that are important, it's the context behind those numbers. What kind of project were you working on? How large was the project? How many people were you managing? What was the type of environment you were working in? And even more importantly, what changed in that project or in your role because you were in that position?
Yeah, those are great responses. I mean, I think for me, it's just making sure the resume is neat and clear. I think a lot of times people tend to add a lot of information and not make it very clear in explaining your story or that's including the bullet points, summary, and it's not as organized. So if it is easy and clear to read, then a lot of times we're going to see exactly what experience you have. And of course, as Nika said, like, if it matches your background, we're going to reach out to you. But again, it has to be clear and understanding.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are great points, especially coming from recruiters and managers. Just hearing what they look out first, that will help our listeners out a lot. Great. Let's shift from resumes to LinkedIn because having a strong profile is also very important as having a strong resume. So what's the biggest opportunity job seekers are missing out on LinkedIn today? Chandra, we'll start with you.
I would say it's definitely to build your network when you don't need your network. Don't wait to become visible and get to know people ahead of time and get to know them for who they truly are and for who the companies truly are so that you know if you want to be part of that or not.
Yeah, that is great. I mean, that is the biggest thing too. And while you're networking and joining groups or connecting with people, it also helps with the job search. So it could also show that, you're active on there, that you may be looking for opportunities. And if you were laid off or anything at all, you can also reach out to people saying, hey, I see you have an opening. We'd love to connect with you. And again, they could remember you from something in the past. They're like, oh yeah, I definitely remember you. So it definitely helps to connect with those people and get your name out there.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great platform where you can build your brand outside of work and connect with people in similar profession. So, like both of you mentioned, starting with just commenting on some of the posts you found valuable, and then sharing. Let's say you read an article and which you want to share with your group of people or people with similar line of work with your insights. So that might be a starting point. So engaging in those posts, commenting on the relevant articles can always position you as somebody who knows, their subject or can position you as an SME. So definitely use this platform to build your brand, I would say. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And more on LinkedIn. So how can someone make their LinkedIn profile feel authentic while still attracting recruiters? Tanuka, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the most important point is I think I see a lot of times people don't mention their full name. So be authentic. Authenticity starts with exactly mentioning your full name, where exactly you're located, because a lot of times it just mentions United States. So, putting your location so that as a recruiter, we know do we need to relocate you or are you only looking at local jobs. So things like that, and of course something your LinkedIn should be a reflection of your resume, so make sure that the dates match as well as your accomplishments. I think LinkedIn should also tell a story about your career and what you have been successful at. So that would be my take. Mhm.
I would say another important thing is to use recruiter language when making your LinkedIn feel more authentic. And what I mean by that is you want to refer to your title, your industry, your systems used, your skill sets you've acquired, and just be very plain with that. You don't want to say, oh, I'm a strategic visionary driving transformational excellence. You want to say, I'm a senior project manager.
That is so true. And that's exactly what I was going to mention too about the professional like story. So if you want to like, how you can mention, like you want to match your background to your resume and be clear about it. And as Sandra, it's just one of those things where you list out not just the title, not just the dates, but also the responsibilities and your experience. And a lot of times people don't always put, if you have 20, 30 years of experience, you may not always put it on your resume. But what we're going to do is go to your LinkedIn page and we'll see exactly your full story. And that's what you want to tell is your background, is your story overall, and listing out those responsibilities you had for each job. You don't always have to put exactly everything, but at least maybe 3 or 4 bullet points for each job that you've had and just have like a little summary. But I think being active and having those details in there definitely highlights you. And it also shows a lot of hiring managers your background.
Exactly. And you can also use that featured section on your profile, and you can add different types of posts that you did or accomplishments that you talked about. And then people can see that right when they go to your profile, which is great. But going back to resumes for a moment. So we talked about grabbing attention, but what's one section on your resume that candidates often overlook? Kat, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I feel like I keep mentioning the professional summary, but that really is the biggest thing I think a lot of people tend to skip over. People either don't have it on their resume, or if they use it, they don't really put as much detail about their experience. Maybe they have saying, okay, I have 5 years of experience and there's that, and I'm looking for a new opportunity. And that doesn't really help us out a lot. What does help too is if you're adding as much details about your background, which a lot of times you can use AI for that stuff too. If you don't really know exactly what to put and what to help, you can either come out to a recruiter or instead just use one of the AI platforms that would help. But you want to add in the amount of years experience you've had, type of skill sets that you focus on, depending if it's technical side, but you want to just make it more unique and more impactful to highlight, like I said, your experience. Because a lot of times, like I said, even if you have 20 or 30 years experience, you're not always going to put that on your resume. A lot of times people tend to just keep their more recent 10 years. But if that summary will show, oh, I don't have just 10 years. I have 20, 30 years of doing X, Y, and Z. And that's what you want to put in there and use that.
I think something that we see people leave out a lot are adding accomplishments to their current position. A lot of the time they will list what they're doing in the job, but not what they've done well in the position. And I know I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but really highlight what happened because you were the person doing it. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Chandra because, when it comes to IT resumes, software engineering resumes, we do see a lot of role and responsibilities, but the impact is always missing. So I think the accomplishments, some of the metrics that you have achieved or successfully delivered in terms of an application or a project is essential. Another thing which I do notice is a lot of times we see a repetition. So kindly avoid that because then you just copy paste the same responsibility over and over again, and that's not a good use of using that space in your resume. So yeah.
Yeah. Similar to our resume question, when a recruiter lands on someone's LinkedIn profile, what's the very first thing they look at there? Chandra, we'll start with you.
I would say confirmation. So using project manager as the example, a construction project manager is not the same as a financial project manager. Clarity beats being clever any day of the week. So it's very important to state what type of project manager you are. And I would put this a lot of times in the headline of your LinkedIn. Make it a lot easier for us as recruiters to discover who you are and what you can do in your
Yeah, I would do the same. I mean, whenever I look at someone's LinkedIn, I see how clearly the job titles are, how robust are their professional summary, and some of the impact that they have done or they've had in their earlier roles, and also a career trajectory, like how have they started and what they have done. So those are things that I usually look at when I'm looking at someone's LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, those are great, and I think for me, it's more so like the headline and like the current role. I know within clinical research and healthcare, the title doesn't always match responsibilities that you're doing. So I always try to also look at the responsibilities listed below. It does help to see exactly what you're doing, what experience you have, which is what I mentioned earlier, is that using that type of tool or using adding those information in because it does help your background and tell your story. But that's a lot of times what I look at is to see exactly what you're doing. So if it's your current role, if like I said, for instance, I have another position that's like Encore, and I know that's a system, right? So if you have Encore in your title, that's great. But if you don't have it and you don't have it listed in the job responsibilities, a lot of times I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if you have the right experience. So a lot of times you want to be able to tell your story, adding those informations because it does help for us to when we do look at those, so the title or the responsibilities.
Yep, definitely. And we have a question from our audience, so let me pull that up. Allie asks, is there anything that you're seeing on resumes that you would tell a job seeker to remove or change immediately?
Yeah, I can answer that. I'm going to go back to it, the professional summary. A lot of times it's very generic. I'm just going to remove it and say, hey, unfortunately, we're just not going to use this unless you want to add something a little bit more detailed. That's great. Sometimes I'll do it myself too, with your permission, of course, and making sure that everything in your resume is accurate. I never want to change anything without your permission. But that is something I feel like a lot of times people don't really use often, which is why I'm like, if it's generic, I'm gonna have to remove it, unfortunately. Another thing too is skill set. You know, I think for one of the positions I had in the past was a PhD graduate. So a lot of times they were looking at publications, and those hiring managers, they were looking at them. If you didn't have your publications on there, they're like, well, is this person, doing all this stuff? What exactly are they doing? What have they been doing outside of school? Were they doing research? So that's a very big thing, especially if you're applying for a job that is dealing with something within the science field and you have those publications. Definitely add them. I wouldn't say remove it, but I think a lot of times people tend to forget it.
I have another good one to add. Very good, Kat. Is when you have a job hiatus. A lot of times people will see that people will just leave the gap on their resume, and it's important to put career break or hiatus from career and explain why in a professional manner you took that career break and the steps that you did during that time to be relevant for your next position.
Yeah, my take would be this is again for candidates who are 20 plus years of work experience. I would try to condense the first 10 years into short bullet points so that most recruiters or hiring managers would be interested to know what your recent experience is all about. So focus on your recent projects and experiences, and the one that you've done at the start of your career, condense them into small bullet points so that you can maintain that maybe 2 to 3 page resume. So yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's great. So building a network, we're moving on to our next question. Building a network is one thing, but building relationships is definitely something different. So how can candidates turn LinkedIn connections into meaningful professional relationships? Tanuka, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I guess I always welcome candidates who are very clear of on what they are looking at, who can explain their background very well. So to start with, I think it is very essential to have your messaging should be extremely targeted about what's your background like and what is the kind of job you're looking at and where have you applied. And then of course these are long-term relationships, so take some time to kind of invest in it. There are a lot of times we may not have a ready position right away, but then once you are in touch, that position may come 6 months or 7 months down the line. For example, I one of the machine learning engineer reached out to me back in February, but I could only place her in August. So it takes time for you to work with a recruiter to land a good job. So I would say invest in that relationship and be very targeted in your messaging.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's also connecting, with people on there. If it's liking a post or reposting or congratulating people on there and the accomplishments, it shows that, you're active on there, you're building rapport over time. And again, if you're looking for opportunities in the future and right now, like I said, you're not currently, looking, but let's just say in the moment in the future you are, you can always contact those people and just like, hey, like I remember, we were in contact with each other in the past. Just wanted to see if anything opening now. And a lot of times they'll remember you and your conversation because again, it's still there. You're still connecting with them. So I think if you're going out of your way to be engageful and not just looking for just a job, but just being out there, it does help. And you said you're just connecting with people.
I absolutely agree with Kat because I myself utilize this on a daily basis. Simply making a connection with someone is not networking. It's really important to create ways for people to remember each other. Like she said, during those comments, congratulating, sharing insight, those are all great ways. Perfect answer.
Yeah. And we're going to do another question from the audience. So instead of restating the same responsibilities and multiple job titles on your resume, what would you suggest doing?
I can take that. I would suggest, and this is exactly what I was telling, not be repetitive. Look for some of these responsibilities from the job description and try to create something which is you're repeating. So, for example, let's say you have managed an implementation for a HRIS system, and then you can talk about that in the first project, and then in the next one you can talk about something like how you manage, what was the change management process like. So, managing the stakeholder expectation, or what was the result in terms of the increase in efficiency. So something on those lines, but let's that HRIS implementation doesn't repeat again. So you are putting the same thing but in a more creative manner that is aligned, which is again aligning to the job responsibility that is on the job. So that would be my take. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. I would also like to add using those responsibilities and then building up on them, with each career move that you make moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you can constantly change it. I think Sandra mentioned like adding your accomplishments for each job. That also helpful too. So I think as long as you have the responsibilities, you don't have to word everything word for word, right? No one really wants that too. As long as you change it around a little bit, it does help. And again, those compliments you have, there's certain things like, for instance, as recruiters, a lot of times we don't just recruit in US, right? Sometimes we recruit internationally or maybe Canada, whatever case may be. We'll add those information. So if you have stuff like that too, that you work globally, adding those informations do help. And sometimes you may not always have the exact country you're working with, for every single role that you had. So I think as long as you're being unique with those bullet points, it does help too.
Those are great. And let me pull one from Jason. So what is an example of a generic summary versus unique to the person?
Yeah, I can take this one. I know I mentioned a lot of it, professional summary, but I think a generic one really comes down to, let's just say, 2 sentences. And I've seen a bunch of people sometimes do that. They'll say, let's just use clinical research because that's pretty much my background, right? So let's just say a clinical research professional with 5 years experience, and then just that's a period, right? And then you go into maybe, great in communication and all that sorts. That's not a very good professional summary. It's very generic. It doesn't explain your overall background. In clinical research, there's a lot of details that goes into it. And depending on what your role consists of, the unique thing is more so saying a clinical research professional with 10 plus years of experience working on oncology, neurology, infectious disease studies, phases 1 through 5. If there's a phase 1A, a phase 1B, you want to add those information, including those systems too. I know sometimes people tend to put it in the skills section, which is great, but it's also good to add them up there in case, depending on what if you're going, let's say, for a clinical data manager, right? You want to add that back up there again to show what experience you have, because then we can see it right away. Having that, I think, being a little bit more detailed and summarize your experience overall, that's how it should be. I say more like a paragraph. It shouldn't be super long, but again, it's just explain your story overall.
Well said, Kat. I want to add, if you're ever getting caught up on that, is to just go back to where we revisit the recruiter language. When you're going into your generic summary, it's going to be the same for everyone. Everyone might have 5 years experience in the construction industry, right? But make sure you include your title, your industry experience, your systems used, and the skill sets that you built throughout all of that. Your skill sets are going to be what set you apart.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And I think exactly, let's not dynamic leader, all those adjectives do not work. It has to be extremely metrics driven. So yes, your industry, what have you worked as in your last few projects, and some of your major accomplishments, in a much more generalized manner, but not really stressing on what kind of leader you are and what kind of team player you are. So that's what your professional summary should be. Yeah.
Great. And we're going to pull one more question from Morgan. So this is a summarized version. So when hiring entry-level talent, how can candidates identify and showcase the experiences employers value most, especially when in-demand skills are constantly changing?
Yeah, I can take this one. So a lot of the positions I currently have, or at least have, and I know most of it that's either entry level would be, in New Jersey, Colorado, but again, depends on, of course, the company that or where you live in, the company that looks to hire someone. It's entry level. But for me, for the science side of things, a lot of times you're not going to have the experience, right? You're just graduating school and you don't know what to maybe put on there, or like I said, you may not have all the industry experience. The biggest thing, as long as you add maybe your courses that you have, completed in college, maybe some internships, maybe some research, even if it's just research and it wasn't paid, add it on there. It's going to show that besides you just going to school and doing these classes, you were doing other things, outside of it. Even if it was just volunteer work, it's still going to show you are still doing something. And then at the same time too, and I had this actually from another hiring manager, the biggest thing, he was like, you guys just graduated. I completely understand that you don't have the experience. But he's like, what I like to see is someone who has worked, even if they were a waitress, even if they were doing just anything. It shows that their work ethic. It shows that they were willing to go out there and be able to complete the school, but also do work and have some type of responsibility behind just the school. But besides that, so I think it helps to list out those accomplishments. And you may feel like, oh, well, it's not relatable to the science field. Again, it still shows that you were doing something. When I was in school, I was in IT. It does not relate to anything that I'm currently doing now, or when I went to school for science, but I was working in the IT department. Again, these shows accomplishments you were doing throughout your school, no matter what it is. So if it's entry level, again, list everything on there. And yes, the willingness to learn does help, but you want to add those informations on your resume.
I agree. No value add there. That's well said, Kat.
Yeah, that was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, and of course, if you have worked on a project internship, clearly mention what was the project description, and of course, what was the outcome. And I think that was a perfect answer, Kat.
Great. Yeah. As we wrap up, we'll leave our listeners with some advice. So what's one LinkedIn feature people should use more often? Chandra, we'll start with you.
Ooh, I would say comments. Comments are a nice little secret people don't typically think of. And when they do comment, it's really important to make sure that you expand on those. So if someone posts something and you're not really a poster yourself, but you want to add value to someone else's post, you don't say, oh, great idea or great work. You want to add value to that. Why do you think they did great work at their company? Why do you think that the idea they shared is great? And really help to connect and network with the people in your group.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And another thing I think a lot of times people don't use too is the open to work or job preferences. I think for open to work, a lot of times the recruiters or hiring managers are going to find you right away because, again, you're looking for work. So we're going to contact you a lot quicker. Same thing for job preferences. A lot of times people are looking to relocate, right? And depending on the circumstances, whatever case may be, it could be for family or wanting to move back closer to home or just wanting to move to a different state because you want to, right? But a lot of times if you don't have it on that you're willing to relocate, you might get passed over because they see you're in a different state completely. But if you have it open to relocating and listed whatever states you're looking to move to, a lot of times we're going to reach out to you because maybe it's one of the positions we're working on. It's really hard to find in that particular state or that particular city that we're going to reach out to someone who wants to be in that area. So using those tools definitely open up, I think, a lot more doors for you.
Yes, I agree with Kat that open to work is a very good feature. Recruiters are always looking for candidates, especially people like us, where we have very aggressive deadlines to find talent. We will definitely work with a person who has an open to work banner. Second thing, I think job alerts. Whenever you're searching for a job, save those, and so that LinkedIn sends you a job alert every 24 hours, and that becomes easier for you to apply. And my last would be, there are a lot of times there are amazing events that happen. So I think that's a great way to, increase your insights about the industry or the job that you're at, but also a great platform to network with those participants. So search for those events and be a part of them.
Yep.
I have been doing that, and it has been a very big value add for me.
Awesome. Great. Well, we are out of time for today. Thank you to our panel of experts, and thank you to everyone that commented. Don't forget to follow System One on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you tune in to Sound Off with System One every first and third Friday at 2 p.m. And our next Sound Off with System One is Friday, September 4th, and we'll be having a live Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.